All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us for the SBIR presentation today with David Walker, presented by the Small Business Development Center. If you have any questions during this webinar, feel free to post it in the chat and we will get to it as we are able to. And then we'll also send you a copy of the recording and the presentation as well. Within the next couple of business days. But just a little bit about the Small Business Development Center. We are a nonprofit organization primarily hosted by the SBA as well as the state of California. We provide no-cost confidential advisory services as well as low to no-cost training services like this one today. Some of our local experts are shown here. So lots of different advisors with different specialties, whether that's startup information, funding, SBIR, growing the business, etc. And then we also have access to other advisors within our Northern California region. Our center specifically, we serve Shasta, Trinity, and Siskiyou counties here in Northern California. Later in the chat, I'll post some information for how to connect to your local SBDC office if you are outside of our service area. So before I hand it off to David, I do have to read this disclaimer. So the information provided in this webinar and any supplementary materials provided to registrants are intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute professional, financial, or legal advice. No registrant should act or fail to act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper financial, legal, or other professional advice specific to your situation. The Northern California Small Business Development Center and its host, the HSU Sponsored Programs Foundation, specifically disclaims any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence, directly or indirectly, of the use and application of any of the information presented in this webinar. All right, and I will hand it over to our presenter, David Walker.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, guys. There's only a couple of us here today, so if you have any questions, just feel free to toss them in the chat, and Emily, go ahead and interrupt me. It's fine if there's any questions. We should be able to get through this probably quicker than an hour, but yeah, we'll see. You know, you guys just may love the sound of my voice droning on and on, so we'll see. This is a little bit about me. I've been around for a long time. Some people would say too long. I've been with companies that have won and lost SBIR and STTR programs. And I've been a proposal reviewer for the National Science Foundation and their SBIR program now and then. So I know a bit about them. And if you are interested in it, if you qualify for it, you know, feel free to contact me if you'd like any help with anything having to do with it, and we'll do what we can. So let's get into it. This is what we're going to go through, and we'll skip the introduction, and well, this is the introduction, so I guess we're not skipping it. Anyway, I'm sure you've heard of these companies, some of them anyway: Symantec, iRobot, Qualcomm, 23andMe. All of these companies got their start with the SBIR program. SBIR is the Small Business Innovation Program. It has a sister program called Small Business Technology Transfer. They're federal government programs. The last couple of years, they've been nicknamed America's Seed Fund. This is what the US government comes up with when they're trying to make something look like a really cool marketing thing. And actually, I guess that is better than initials SBIR, STTR. Especially considering the fact that STTR isn't really the initials for Small Business Technology Transfer, but yeah, nobody seemed to care. The program's been around for over 40 years, and nobody's complained as far as I know. So anyway, here's what it is in a nutshell. SBIR, STTR, it's a federal government program. Depending on which agency you're working with, it'll be either a grant or a contract to a small business to develop innovative technologies that meet a federal need, have market opportunity, and technical risk. And we'll get into that, what qualifies, what doesn't. And that's really depends on the different agency you're working with. And we're going to get into that a little bit during this presentation. Give you an idea of the scope of this program. Any federal agency with an R&D budget that exceeds $100 million has to have an SBIR program, which means there are 11 government agencies that have an SBIR or STTR program. Since 1983, there's been over $67 billion awarded in over 200,000 separate awards. In 2022, last year, there was over 3.7 billion from 6,500 awards. So, I mean, they give out a lot of money in this program. It's resulted in, we have 70,000 plus issued patents. That number is something like 6 years old, and I don't know the current number. So it's probably approaching 100,000 by now, issued patents through the SBIR program. A lot of jobs for the economy. And an interesting stat that a lot of people are interested in, about 1 in 9 SBIR or STTR awardee companies have received some form of equity investment from the private sector. So it's a good validator is what that means. If you have a venture capital or angel group that understands what the SBIR program is, winning an SBIR award is a really good validation of your technology. So something to keep in mind. About 4,000 companies get funded each year with the program. They do, like we saw last year, they did 3.7 billion. It's somewhere around 4 billion is what they're saying. This comes directly from the SBIR people. Funds are invested each year, and the government doesn't take any equity. They don't take any IP ownership of your company. They do retain march-in rights to your patent. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. But they do not own your patent, and they do not own your technology. They really have no interest in trying to compete with you, but they do maintain an interest, or not an interest, but a right to march in for the technology if you refuse, for instance, to sell products based on your technology to them. That's the reason for that. Little bit of background. Started in 1997 or 1977 as a pilot program under President Carter through the National Science Foundation. It was signed into law federally by Reagan in '82. The goal is to meet federal research and development needs, as well as increase private sector commercialization, stimulate technological innovation, and foster partnerships and cooperation between small business and research institutions. Let's see. Okay, I want to get rid of that. Just a second. Sorry. Okay. So the bottom line is it's a novel and innovative product solution that fulfills an agency or public need. An agency is spelled there, I see. But the bottom line is, in order to qualify for an SBIR or STTR award, you need to have a product or an innovative product or solution that is new, innovative, really cool, that will fulfill an agency need. And as it turns out, that's pretty much anything that's innovative, really, and that has a level of technical risk. And we'll get into why a little bit later. Some details on the program. There's 3 phases in the program. Phase 1 is concept or development. The idea is you have, you have an idea. There you go. You have a concept that's not proven, has some technical risk. You don't know if it's going to work or not. And you're going after funding from the federal government to develop the idea and see if it's going to be feasible. They're really looking for technical feasibility in phase 1. Depending on the agency, you can get up to $275,000 for a 6 to 12-month program to prove that technical risk. This is a 10,000-foot view. Each program, each agency has their own little quirks and their own little things that you have to qualify, that you have to jump through to qualify. The award rate isn't bad, though. 10 to 20% of the proposals that get submitted get awarded. That varies by agency, but it's not a bad award rate when it comes to things like grants. So it's a good, it's an interesting program. If you are successful in phase 1, you can apply for a phase 2. Phase 2 is money to develop a prototype or to further get you to full commercialization of your concept. Depending on the agency, again, it can be up to $1.8 million. Sometimes there are additional programs that will co-fund it, and you can get even more. But the phase 2 is a 2-year program, and because phase 2 consists of winners of phase 1 and that have gone through it successfully, the award rate is much higher. It's about 30 to 40%. They also have a phase 3, which basically means commercialization, but there's no government funding for that. So it's kind of a odd thing. There's no government funding for phase 3, but phase 3 is, for government terms, the commercialization of your product. You might win, if you're with certain agencies, you might be awarded a government contract to provide the things that you've developed under the SBIR program, and that would be considered phase 3. The government's buying the stuff from you, which is why they maintain the march-in rights. My understanding, and I've not been able to confirm this, I was told this by a SBIR guy at an agency, that there has been one instance of the government exercising their march-in rights to the patent, and that happened at the DoD, I've been told, when the Department of Defense, when they paid for a phase 1 and a phase 2, and then the company refused to sell the things they had developed to the Department of Defense. And so it was then, after they refused to sell them to the government used their march-in rights and had the products made for them at another company. That's what I was told. I don't know if it's true, so I hesitate to even tell you that. But that's the reason they maintain the march-in rights to your patent, is in case you're silly enough to have them pay for the development and then not provide the products to them under a contract. So anyway, so that's how it works. That's the program in a nutshell. This is just some info, a summary of the awards that have been done by year. It's been around a long time. You can see from this graph starts in 1983. The program was put in place in 82. This came directly from SBIR. And this is the number of awards and the number of companies that have been given those awards. Some companies, you can tell, have obviously gotten multiple awards under SBIR. And this is the amount of money over the decades that have been allocated. In 2022 is about $4.4 billion allocated, which is interesting because I believe the slide I had earlier said 3.7, but I think that has to do with how they calculate the award amounts. Bottom line is it's a lot of money, and it's available to small businesses that qualify, and the number of small businesses that are not aware of the program, to me, is a little bit staggering. The word needs to get out a little bit more about the program. This is where we're at the moment, according to SBIR.gov. Like I said, any agency that has over $100 million in their R&D budget is required to have an SBIR program. So the Department of Defense has the largest SBIR program, $2.2 billion for 2022. And they will be looking naturally for things related to defense. If you are a company that developed a new firing pin for a tank, they might be interested in discussing with you. If you have some kind of new radar that could be used for defense, they might be interested in speaking with you. Health and Human Services, 1.2, almost 1.3 billion. They're going to be looking for innovations in medicine and medical type of things. Department of Energy, they're going to be looking for innovations related to solar panels, batteries, different ways to work on clean energy and things like that. NASA, it's obvious, space stuff, and there's a whole bunch of others. What's interesting is, well, the others, for instance, there's 98 million, 98.7 million, and you have departments like USDA, so they're going to be interested in agricultural, farm products. Homeland Security, DHS is Homeland Security. The Department of Education, Department of Commerce, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Transportation, and they have much smaller SBIR programs, but they're also looking for innovations. The other one, which is the fifth largest from SBIR allocation, is the National Science Foundation. And I bring them up because they're not like any of the others. They're not like Defense, which is looking for Department of Defense stuff. They're not like Human Services, which is looking for medical stuff, because the National Science Foundation really just works with innovation as a whole. So they're required by law to have an SBIR program because they have an R&D budget well over $100 million. So what they will fund is just about anything that they say, they develop their program and they said, we'll fund anything that has a market opportunity, is innovative, okay, and has an element of technical risk. In other words, you don't know for sure if it's going to work. If your idea, if your concept meets those three criteria, you stand a decent chance of getting an SBIR award from the National Science Foundation, whether it's a medical device or a new way to prepare food or whatever kind of innovation you may have. So they're a very popular place for people to apply for SBIR, and they have a very robust SBIR program. And I'm a little bit prejudiced because probably because in my experience, the companies that I've been involved with have gotten more awards from the National Science Foundation than the others. Gotten one from DoD, been denied several times by the Department of Energy. We've gotten one from Health and Human Services, but we've gotten several through the National Science Foundation. So maybe your odds would be good there. Depends on where you're at. So again, what does SBIR fund? Innovations, and it needs to be research, okay? And when we're talking about research, we're talking about technical research, not market research, okay? Generally, they do not want to fund your market validation efforts. They will help. Interestingly, they will help with your market validation efforts, some of them through programs they have, but they don't want to fund you putting up your website unless there's something truly innovative with the website. You know, it would have to be part of your innovative thing. They're not going to fund your day-to-day business activities. They're going to fund your effort to do your proof of concept or your technical feasibility. They will fund things that are responsive to the needs of the agency, responsive to the topic that they put out. The way it works is the department will announce, like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, they'll announce topics that they're interested in. And you'll find those online. And you respond to the topics. If you have an innovation that fits that topic need, you respond to that with a proposal written the way they, under their instructions. This is how you write a proposal, and they have those instructions, and that's how you respond to it. You need to be responsive to the topic. If they ask for a solar panel, don't propose oil and gas, okay? It needs to be responsive to the topic. needs to have commercial potential, because part of the reason they're doing this is to help the U.S. economy. So there needs to be commercial potential in your product, in your idea. And there needs to be some unanswered questions. This is the most cloudy, the most subjective, I guess, part of the whole deal is technical risk, because the technical risk is defined somewhat differently in my experience from agency to agency. But the bottom line is the way they're looking at it from the directors and from the people I've been talking to, the way they look at it is, if you can be funded by an angel investor, for instance, if you can get funding from a venture capital firm, you don't need SBIR. They're looking for people and for technologies where there's too many unanswered questions, perhaps, where there needs to be some kind of technical validation that normal investors, your everyday private sector investors, are going to be reticent to actually fund. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that's going to qualify for the program. So see if I can remember what these cool little icons mean. To qualify for the SBIR program, you need to have a small for-profit business. Okay, it needs to be an American business. Okay, it needs to be established in America. Your effort that you're proposing has to be done in the United States. You can't have it done in China. You can't have it done in Mexico. You can't have it done in Canada. It has to be done in the United States. You need to have fewer than 500 employees, generally speaking. And the program is to fund R&D, not marketing, excuse me, not to develop technologies that are already commercialized. If you already have something and you just need to make it a little bit better, it's not going to fund that. And not working on low risk technology that only needs capital. If there's not an element of risk, they probably will not fund it. And another thing to think about while I'm got the neuron going off in my head, if there's a difference between something that's innovative and something that's just a step up, a technical, came into my head and came out, a technical advantage, a little bit of a just a step up. They're looking for something that's qualitatively different, quantitatively different. Best example I heard of is not an incremental improvement. In other words, they're not looking for something to make you go from an iPhone 5 to an iPhone 6. They're looking for something to go from a flip phone to a smartphone. Okay, not an incremental improvement, but a true innovation. I hope that was clearer than it sounded like it was to me. Get a little deeper into it. Like I said, there's 11 agencies that participate in SBIR. And there's a difference between SBIR and STTR. All 11 agencies participate in SBIR, but only 5 participate in STTR. And I bring it up because STTR might be an interesting way for you to go. Fewer companies, there's less competition in STTR, generally speaking, than SBIR. So STTR is established when you're working with a university or a research institution. If you're working with a university, okay, if the technology has been developed at a university or some kind of other research institution, STTR, there's rules about how you can spend the money. There's rules about how you can spend the money for SBIR and STTR, but with STTR, a lot of the money will go to the research institution to help you with the development process. And so it's a little bit different on the minimums and maximums that the small business can participate compared with subcontractors to your program. Just know that the small business is always the applicant and the awardee. A university cannot apply, but a university can be a subcontractor to the small business. And if they are, and if the math works in terms of the budget, you can go under STTR, where there are fewer applicants, generally speaking, and maybe your chances are a little better to win the award. And these are the agencies: the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, DOE, NASA, and the National Science Foundation will do SBIR and STTR. EPA, Agriculture, Homeland, Commerce, Education, and Transportation will only do SBIR. One thing about it is, don't judge an agency by its name. I'll give you an example. I had an opportunity years ago with a really cool hydrogen gas sensor. And hydrogen gas sensor, okay, Department of Defense, believe it or not, had some level of interest in it, because when certain things are firing in their big guns, sometimes hydrogen would build up as an off gas in a chamber. And if there was an innovative way to sense that, perhaps, you know, the sensor would help. Department of Energy was interested because hydrogen was a clean burning fuel. And so if you have an innovative sensor that would be part of a component for a larger hydrogen energy system of some kind, then you know, they had an interest. NASA had an interest because they have these big tanks that shoot rockets into the sky that are fueled by hydrogen. And the National Science Foundation, they had an interest because the National Science Foundation is interested in everything. In fact, if you look at the National Science Foundation's topics of interest, they list everything you can imagine: medical, energy, manufacturing, and they have another, after you go through all of these lists of the areas they have an interest in, there's one final area that says other. Okay, they'll fund pretty much anything. If you can't find your niche in these departments for what it is you're doing, try the National Science Foundation, because if there's a market for it, if it's innovative, and if there's technical risk, they may be interested. So don't judge an agency just by its name. A little more about the program. Like I said, funding is going to be either a grant or a contract. National Science Foundation just does grants. Department of Defense just does contracts. They'll give you a contract to get the money to you for the SBIR or STTR. It depends on the agency, but none of them are a loan. You don't have to pay back any of these. They're not equity. They do not take stock in your company. They're non-dilutive. And like I said, I'll reiterate this: you own the technology, you own the intellectual property. The government will retain march-in rights. I only know of one instance in the last 40-something years where it's been used. And some agencies will pay for patents, some agencies won't. And by the way, the ones that do generally do it only under very certain circumstances. So be aware of that. If you're thinking, well, you know, I could use some of this money to pay the attorney for the patent application, yeah, they're not going to do that. You don't have to have a patent to apply for the SBIR. A patent or a patent application will probably help your application, but but it's not required. So keep that in mind. There is a restriction on the use of funds. They have to be used, like I was saying, they have to be used for bringing up the technical concept, you know, for proving the technical concept of your idea. You can pay the salaries of the engineers to do it, to do the research that needs to be done. You can pay for a lot of things, but they have to be directly related to the innovation, to the technical feasibility or proof of concept. You can submit applications to different agencies for similar work. You cannot get 2 contracts for substantially the same work. I think that would kind of logical and kind of makes sense. I mean, if like with my sensor thing, if I were to submit it to the Department of Energy and NASA, that's absolutely permissible, and that's great. But if they both offer me money for it, can't take them both. You know, I got to choose one. You cannot accept awards from multiple agencies for substantially the same work. The odds of getting funded vary from agency to agency and year to year. I've been involved with proposal reviews for the National Science Foundation for a little over 10 years. And I've seen them go from an average of about 1 in 8 proposals to about 1 in 13. It depends on how much money they have that year and how many proposals they get. They get proposals and they say, and they review them, and they basically rank them, and they start spending the money and going down the list, you know, and that's generally speaking how they work. So it does, it varies year to year. But the interesting thing about it is with the National Science Foundation, your proposals are going to be reviewed by people who are experts technically in the field and people who are experts on the commercial side of the field. That almost sounds self-serving because I was a proposal reviewer from the commercial side. So yeah, I'm an expert. Anyway, that's not what I meant, but they are reviewed by people that are in the field that know what they're talking about. You're not going to fool them with a weird proposal. It's or something that's not quite right. They know what they're talking about. I've been very, very impressed and very humbled and very much in awe of some of the people that I've met that are reviewing these proposals. Throughout this thing, I wanted to give you just some examples of companies that have been successful with SBIR. One of my favorites is Blue River Technology. They're not in the San Jose or Bay Area, I don't think, but they're somewhere around there in California. It was a couple of guys who went to Stanford, if I remember right, but they had grown up in farming and in agriculture, and they got together and they had an idea for what if you could use a camera mounted onto a tractor, and then that way you could see where the tractor was about to go. At the time, if a farmer wanted to get rid of the weeds, he'd spread herbicide all over his acreage. Well, these guys thought, well, what if you could use a camera, program it to identify the weeds as the tractor's going, and then just kind of spritz it, you know, with the, so that you're localizing the herbicide. These guys applied for and got, if memory serves, around $650,000 to develop the technology. In a phase 1, there was a certain amount. Phase 2, it added up to $650,000, if I remember right. This was a few years back. Before they finished the phase 2 part of their SBIR, John Deere invested $305 million into the company. And you can look up Blue River Technology. They're doing some really cool things. And they got their start with SBIR, and it wasn't all that long ago. We're going to go a little bit into the agencies themselves, just to give you an idea. And like I said, you're going to get, or like Emily said, rather, you're going to get these slides, so you'll have this. I updated this chart week or two ago, so I think it's current, should be current now, but it will change. The agencies change their stuff all the time, but so you understand now, this will give you an idea of just how different the agencies are when it comes to SBIR. Department of Agriculture has a limit for phase 1. They won't invest, they won't put in more than about $175,000. Your program is 8 months long. If you're successful and you apply for a phase 2, you can get $600,000 for a 24-month program, and it's a grant. But the Department of Defense will do STTR. They will go, some of their phase 1s go up to $250,000. Instead of 8 months, they'll do between 6 and 12. And instead of $600,000 for phase 2, it can be up to $1.5 million. So, and it varies like that from agency to agency to agency. I put in these slides that you'll be getting, I listed the 11 agencies that participate in the program as of now. So you can go through these, see which agency you might have an interest in, and you can go to their website or just type in Google. If you're Department of Energy, type in Department of Energy SBIR in Google, and you'll go right to their website, and you can see how they work their SBIR program. These are some other ones. Department of Health and Human Services has really interesting limits. All these other agencies are 100,000 and 400,000, 200,000 and 1.5 million. Health and Human Services says $295,924. I don't know how they figure that, but that's what they say for phase 1. Phase 2 is a lot, but it's an odd $1,972,828. I'm not that familiar with Health and Human Services, which is really the NIH, National Institutes of Health. They have the lion's share of that. Interesting how they set their limits. Anyway, and then you've got the others. Last one here, the National Science Foundation. Like I said, I'm biased. I think they have the best program, and the most. They certainly have the most flexible one, at least in my opinion, they do. They have STTR. Phase 1 limits are generous, 275,000. Phase 2 limits are $1 million, but there are also provisions for additional funding if your situation meets the criteria. For instance, if you have, as you're going through phase 2, if you have an investor, they for a couple $100,000 or something, they may match that investment if it meets certain criteria. And so you get 200,000 from the investor, you get 200,000 from the National Science Foundation. Not bad. And again, it's a grant. So with the National Science Foundation, it's a grant, which means there's still restrictions on the money, but the mechanism is not necessarily as onerous, perhaps, as a contract might be. So, like I said, you'll have these slides. And I sprinkled in a couple other success stories. This one is a La Jolla, California-based company that figured out a way to be able to measure iron in your blood. They're one of the first tests to successfully measure iron in your blood, and they won an SBIR. You can read about, by the way, any success story I put up here, and I think there's 4 or 5 sprinkled in here. You can find out about them at SBIR.gov. If you're interested in this, go to SBIR.gov. Right now, the website looks like it was built in the year 2000, and that's because I think the website was built in the year 2000. They are doing a beta website, and you'll have a link to their new beta website coming up, and it looks a lot cooler. But I've still had more success finding what I want in the old one as opposed to the new one. That may change, and you may have better experience with the new one. But at any rate, SBIR.gov that's where a lot of this information came from, and it's where you can go to find out more about the program. And there's a lot of these success stories came from SBIR.gov. So let's take a quick break. Do we have any questions, Emily?
So it looks like there's not any questions in the chat, but if anyone on here has any, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will get to those.
Yeah, and like I said, if we do have any, go ahead and interrupt me. Happy to do it. Okay, a little bit about how it works. The agencies, and we kind of covered this, but we'll go through it one more time. The agencies are going to list topics that they have an interest in. There's going to be opening and closing dates when they'll accept proposals for the SBIR money on those topics. And they all work a little differently. So you go to sbir.gov, and on there, there's a list of the agencies when they're going to have their proposals ready and that sort of thing. Or you can go directly to the agency you're interested in, and they will tell you when they will have their next solicitation out, when they will list their topics, and who to contact. This is an interesting thing. They will have an agency contact somebody for each topic, for each thing that they want to fund. There's going to be a person that's going to oversee it. And before you submit your proposal, I can't emphasize this enough, it will benefit you mightily to contact them and just have a conversation and say, hey, I saw this topic, here's what we're doing, what do you think? And generally speaking, they will give you suggestions, and they'll tell you right away, hey, this is great, or no, this is terrible, but if you did A, B, and C, maybe, so it's worth contacting them and getting the lay of the land. And they have their contact information on the topic, and their contact information, their name, their email address, their phone number, it's there for a reason. And the reason it's there so that you can contact them and ask them questions about the proposal so they can understand what it is you're doing, and maybe provide a little bit of guidance. Anyway, so then you submit your proposal. Now, the proposal is not a 1 or 2 page thing that you submit. Okay, it's not. By the time you're done, you will have written a book. It's not that bad, but it takes a while, and it needs to be very detailed. You're going to need to have a task plan. You're going to need to describe how you're going to get from this idea, this concept, to technical feasibility, to say, hey, we're going to do these tests, and if this test doesn't work, then we're thinking maybe this, the other thing about these agencies that I should mention, they recognize that this is all new stuff. These are new ideas. So you're going to be proposing something, and it might work and it might not, and you may have to pivot and do something else. Absolutely fine. They understand that. The key is going to be keeping them apprised of your progress as you move along. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but in your proposal, you're going to write your task plan, and a lot of it is based on what you think is going to happen. It's all going to be based on what you think is going to happen. They recognize that this is new stuff, and what you think is going to happen, it may not be exactly what happens. And these people are not dummies. They recognize that. Just make sure you submit your proposal in accordance with the instructions that they give on how to submit the proposal and what's supposed to be in the proposal, and the timing. If they say it is due on March 5th at 5 p.m., do not submit it on March 5th at 5:10. They will reject it out of hand. Seen it happen a lot. Okay. And the other thing I would suggest, I'll get into some suggestions later, but as long as we're on the topic, the other thing I would suggest is, if it's due March, I don't remember what I said, March 5th at 5 p.m., it's due then, try to submit it on March 3rd, get it in well ahead of time. It's just a lot cleaner, and you don't have to deal with a rush of people submitting stuff. The proposals are evaluated by subject matter experts. The subject matter experts, in some agencies, it might be that contact. It might be that agency guy that's listed there. It might be that person plus somebody else he brings in, or it might be like National Science Foundation does, and other organizations do. It might be a panel of subject matter experts that review the proposals and rate them, and and give their opinions so that the program directors can make the decisions on the awards. With the award, There's varying financial and processes reviews that they go through. That some of them are federal requirements. If you are getting more than a certain amount of money from the feds, then they may require a deeper financial review of your books. Sometimes, not. So if you don't get an award, if you're turned down, they will give you a debrief. If you can request, why didn't I get the award? And they'll let you know why, and they'll explain why. And you will usually, at least with the National Science Foundation, because the topics don't vary, you can sometimes tweak the proposal and try to resubmit later on. So, yeah, that's the way the process works. This is another company. These people got some money from the Department of Education for developing a new kind of learning tool. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, something deeply technological having to do with chemicals and electronics and stuff that only PhDs understand. These people had an idea to work with things to help students understand science, tech, engineering, and math, and to get their basis in it, to focus on how they can learn better. So this is the solicitation schedule at the moment. Department of Agriculture looks like they're going strong. This is 2023, this is 2024. And looks like they're ready to accept proposals now. Department of Commerce is expected to open their next round in March of next year. Department for NIST and NOAA, which is the Oceanic Agency, is opening in November. Anyway, you get the idea. At this writing, oops, I'm messing up here. At this writing, this is the way it is, my understanding. This is the way the schedule looks. Again, agencies can change and they can change their minds. So you'll have this so you have an idea. They're generally announced at SBIR.gov, but if you're interested in a specific agency, go to that agency's website. There are requirements to register your business before you'll be allowed to submit a proposal. SAM registration is SAM is the U.S. government's Systems for Award Management, SAM. And you'll need, these are all free, by the way. You'll need to register your company on SAM. If anybody comes to you and says, pay me so much money and I'll get your company registered for you, you can do it for free. And it's not rocket science. If you have trouble, you can contact your SBDC. Our sister organization, PTAC, which is now Apex something, but at any rate, contact your SBDC. We'll guide you, we'll help you. Or if you're doing a SAM registration, there's a helpline, technical support helpline, and they're wonderful. You call them up if you have an issue. You'll need to register with SBA. NASA uses electronic handbook. You might need to register in grants.gov to get DOE. So there are certain things that you have to do in order to get these requirements. Certain registrations that you have to do in order to meet these requirements, so you can submit a proposal. But I wouldn't worry about it unless you're ready to submit the proposal. When you're ready to submit it, that's when you should probably do it. SAM can take 2 weeks or longer. I have a story about SAM, but we only got 10 minutes, so we won't get into that. You're going to have a principal investigator. That's the person in charge of the technical stuff for the proposal. There's requirements for that person. They have to be employed by the small business at the time of the award. Most of the small businesses that apply for these things have one or two employees. They have less than 10 employees. Most of them have less than 10 employees. So we're talking about a guy in a garage. That's okay. You know, but the principal investigator, whoever it is that's going to be in charge with the technical aspects of doing the work, he's going to need to be employed by the business when the award is given. Don't have to have a doctorate, okay? You just have to have enough expertise, and you have to convince the agency that you have enough expertise to be able to scientifically and technically carry out the work. These are three more success stories, one from USDA, one from the Department of Education, one from the Department of Energy. Whole Tree Structures developed a new market for small diameter round timber, which is interesting. I'm not sure how that worked, since SBIR, generally speaking, does not pay for market research, but they would have paid for how to figure out to maybe innovations in manufacturing that small diameter round timber, perhaps. USDA paid for ergonomically efficient handles for gardening tools. Kind of a cool thing, I suppose. NASA gave these people some money for insulation that protects fuel tanks from extreme temperatures, and maybe there's applications for that in housing or other places, who knows? So ask yourself, is your technology really innovative? Is there a market for the idea? What stage are you in? Because there's an interesting thing about here. If you're too far along in your development, if you've eliminated the technical risk, then your chances of getting the award have gone down significantly, probably, in most cases. Agencies vary with what they'll do. But generally speaking, the less technical risk, the less chance you have. At the same time, if if you're going to, if there's a tremendous amount of technical risk, if you're going to propose to develop a transporter like you see on Star Trek or something, they're going to want enough quantifiable evidence that the solution could work. So, there's a balance there. You need some kind of evidence that it could work, but you're not quite sure that it will. But then ask yourself, if you're the principal investigator, you need to be employed by the small business, and you need to be at least more, and you need to be more than half time with the business. Are you ready to work 51+% on your small business if you get this award? We've got 6 minutes. I'm going to go through these tips real quick, and then we'll wrap things up. Start early. Like I said, it's going to take longer than you think. When you write the proposal, you're going to write a lot. Start early. Put your team together and put a schedule together, and make sure that you have the subcontractors on board with the idea, because you're going to want to also bring in letters of support as part of the proposal. That's if you're going to use subcontractors, they're going to be interested in that. Remember your audience. This is going to be reviewed by technical experts like Albert Einstein and commercial experts like that racist Henry Ford. So make sure you remember who it is you're writing for. Follow the proposal guidelines, because if you don't follow the guidelines, they'll ask a question. If you can't follow simple guidelines, why should they believe you can conduct a successful technical, medical, educational, or some other kind of research? It's a good question. Make sure you address the topic. We talked about that. Make sure you read the thing and make sure that you fit. They have SBIR conferences around. Check them out. Tech Connect, SBIR Roadshow, those are good ones. You can talk to the agencies directly at a lot of these conferences and see what's up with them. Check out SBIR.gov. I've mentioned that. Don't forget STTR. Look into that, because there may be less competition there. You may have a better chance if you're working with a university and if you qualify. And don't forget, talk to the program officer or the program director. Introduce yourself, and if you have any questions at all, ask them. They won't talk to you once this proposal deadline has happened. They generally, but if it's before the proposals are submitted, talk to them. I don't know that we have time for this. So bottom line is there's going to be, if reasons they will reject your proposal are because you didn't do it right, or you were late, or you included things that they didn't want to know about. You don't have the right expertise. It's too ambitious. There's not a likelihood of success. There's no commercial potential, things like that. The ways they look are things, characteristics of good proposals. It's a solution to a real problem. There's market potential. It's well written, and it's a good experimental plan. So we've got some things in the chat. I'm not sure what they are, but do we have any questions there, Emily?
So no questions right now. I did post a survey in the chat that really helps us out. So if you guys could go ahead and click on that, and then you can fill it out after we're done. But yeah, just lets us know how we did today and how we can improve.
Great.
And then, yeah, so this last slide has how you can get contacted with us, as well as social media channels as well, and finding your local SBDC. So, definitely reach out if you have a question for us or who to contact.
Yep.
And it looks like we do have a question here in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So someone's saying, as the business owner and as one of the two engineers working on the idea, am I allowed to pay myself and my partner on the research, or the funding only for material or contract research?
Yes, you can pay yourself. Absolutely. You can pay yourself, depending on the program. You can also pay yourself a percentage for the administrative support for you, the administrative support that is directly related to the research. So, okay. If you have any questions for me, you can reach me through Emily, or you can you see that email address where it says emily@norcalsbdc.org. If you change that to David, that goes to me. So feel free to do that. And I'm happy to answer your question. And the other thing, if you're not in Shasta, Trinity, or Siskiyou counties, two things. One, consider yourself lucky. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. I was kidding. But two, if you're not in those areas, there's an SBDC near you. We cover every single county in the United States. It's your tax dollars at work. All our services are free. So go to Google, type in where you're at, and type in SBDC office, and you'll find it. And 90% of them, I'm sure, have somebody who's an expert on SBIRs there. But if not, we're here too, and we'll help guide you that way.
Awesome. And then any last minute questions for us, go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, we will wrap up here in just a second. Okay. Looks like we're good. Thank you so much, David, for presenting today.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you guys sticking through it.
Awesome. All right. We'll hope to see you guys on the next one. And have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Bye-bye.